Welcome back to season 13 of the Neuroscience Meets Social and Emotional Learning podcast, where we connect the science-based evidence behind social and emotional learning and emotional intelligence training for improved well-being, achievement, productivity, and results, using what I saw as the missing link, since we weren't taught this when we were growing up in school: the application of practical neuroscience. I'm Andrea Samadi, an author and an educator with a passion for learning, and launched this podcast 7 years ago now with the goal of bringing all the leading experts together in one place to help us to apply this research in our daily lives. For today's episode number 359, we meet with the best-selling author of more than 20 books in the field of personal growth, Shad Helmstetter. Now, what caught my attention with our next guest was not this huge list of books that he's written, or that he's appeared on over 1,200 radio and television programs, including repeat appearances on Oprah Winfrey, ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN News, or even that his self-talk audio programs are listened to thousands of individuals and families worldwide. There was something else that set our next guest apart from the others. What caught my attention was when I saw a passage in his book, The Power of Neuroplasticity, that described the exact mission or quest that I've been on since looking back at the days I worked with motivational speaker Bob Proctor, and always wondered, like our next guest, why do some people fail while others succeed? I even wrote this question on the back of my first book, The Secret for Teens Revealed, and have been on a mission to connect science to these age-old principles that I've witnessed change many people's lives. Now, we've covered Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich book on this podcast, as well as Wallace D. Wattles' The Science of Getting Rich. And after looking at this question, I've always come to the same conclusion. It has got to come down with the fact that successful people think and act in a certain way. So when I came across Shad Helmstetter, I wanted to learn what he's discovered that connects the age-old books that we've covered on this podcast to science. I wondered what he's discovered about why are some people day-to-day happier, more productive, more fulfilled than others? What makes the difference? Is it kismet, a kind of fate, he asks in his classic book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself? Or has he discovered something important about the way we talk to ourselves that could possibly change the course of our lives? Let's meet Shad Helmstetter, a pioneering dean in the field of self-talk, and see what we can learn from his decades of research that could possibly take us to new heights in 2025 and beyond. Welcome, Dr. Helmstetter. It's such an honor to meet someone who's accomplished so much in a field that I've been immersed in since the late 90s. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Well, I've got to open this up with, how did you get interested in self-talk and programming? So just give us some background of where your career began in this field.
Well, I was always, even early on, very interested in human behavior. And I was especially interested in why some people are successful and other people aren't successful. And early on, I thought this has to have something to do with the way the brain is wired, or the way the brain gets programmed. But at that time, we still couldn't look into the brain and watch it get programmed. So we didn't really know how it worked. But I had this hypothesis, and that what if our brains get wired to help us succeed? Or what if we get the wrong wiring, the wrong programming, and because of that we fail? And all of that was preceded by my earlier career as a linguist. I was a Spanish English for the US government in Cuba during the Cuba crisis. And I had learned that from studying foreign languages that you could actually learn a language by hearing it played in the background. That's exactly how we learn a language when we're kids. It's basically spoken around us in the background, and most of the language we learn, our first language, isn't even directed directly to us. It's just spoken around us, and so the brain is designed to learn that and pick it up. And later, as I went back to school and decided to study more about psychology and human behavior, I began to think, what if what if what if we're thinking in the wrong language? What if we're thinking in the language of cannots and problems instead of solutions and alternatives and success? Well, that's where it started. It was that combination of a high level of interest in human behavior, a, a background in foreign language or language learning that ended up being my leading toward my work in self-talk.
Wow, I love it. And I love it because, in school, we weren't taught how to think in a certain way towards being successful. It wasn't one of the subjects that we had to take. So we had to find this outside of school. And I found it, through studying a motivational speaker in the late 90s and learned about the importance of positive thinking. And thank goodness I learned that in my late 20s so that it kind of shaped me. But I remember looking at people that I would see coming through these seminars, and they were from all walks of life, right? Like some were truck drivers, some were business people, but they all had something similar and in common. And I just saw that they thought differently. I didn't hear anyone say, that, I can't do that, or I'm going to try this, like certain words. So I'm just wondering, because now I know the linguist side, are there certain words that you would say we shouldn't say or think?
Yes, and there are certain words that we should say and think. One of the things I decided to do early on was in the field of psychology at that time, almost all of the study was in the area of um, problems and difficulties. People who were being studied were people who had problems. And I thought, why aren't we studying the people who are doing really well and find out what's different about them? So I decided that's one of the areas that I would look into. And what I discovered was the people that do really well, the people who are successful overall, and I don't mean just financially, but just overall, generally doing well in life, they were actually speaking a different language. It was still in English, but they were using different words. I ended up years later writing a book called The Secret Words of Success. I identified the, the top messages, the top keywords, the top programs that people who were doing really well had. And what's fascinating is that the people who speak the language of, I'll just call it the language of success.
Yeah.
We could call it the language of well-being. But the people who were speaking the language of success, in many cases, weren't aware that they were speaking it or thinking it. Somehow, they had gotten wired. Their brain had gotten wired with the right vocabulary, the right programs. It's usually through good parenting or maybe teachers at school. Something in their life influenced them to begin to think in that way. And then the more you think in a certain way, your brain is designed to think more and more in that same way because it attracts the same kinds of programs that you already have that are the strongest. So the people who are thinking negatively all of the time, they wonder why they can't just make a New Year's resolution and stop thinking negatively. It's just because their brains are programmed with that vocabulary, and that's That's the default. That's what we always go back to. So to summarize that, people who do well in life, generally, if you study their language, are using different words than people who are failing in life. And it was that early recognition that caused me to say, well, if that's the case, and I already understood language because I studied foreign languages, then why can't we just learn the language of succeeding, the language of well-being? Why can't we just learn the language of success? And why couldn't we do that? Why couldn't we reprogram the brain with that new language? And that's what positive self-talk is all about.
Oh, this is cool. Could you give me an example of a couple of the success words? Because I know the ones that are, the ones we're supposed to not think. But what are a couple of words that we should be thinking or saying?
Well, it's hard to take them out of context and have them make a lot of sense because it's sort of like taking one vitamin pill and then hoping you feel better. But it's really the collection of a lot of different words and messages, programs that add up to success. But they include words, the obvious words like achieve, focus, alternative, solution. People who are solution oriented, for instance, live very different lives than people who are victim oriented. People who are achievement oriented um, live very different lives than people who are failure oriented. So yeah, the list would start with those obvious ones. Goals would be a good one. People who think, let's say you have two different people. One has a goals mindset. They think about goals. They set goals. They've learned how to set goals. They've learned how to follow them. And they've learned endurance, so they stay with them. They have determination. That's another key word that we use. Successful people use the word determination because they see themselves as being willing to go the distance and get the job done. So somebody who has a goals mindset thinks about not just goals differently, but they think about life differently. Because life is a series of opportunities and a series of challenges. And the goals oriented person sees challenges as steps to that to achievement. And so they look at life differently. And yeah, that's just one example, but I'm not going to, I don't, when I'm interviewing or talking to someone, I'm actually not there to sell books. So this isn't about the book, The Secrets, or The Secret Words of Success. But that book allowed me to put on paper all of the principal words that I would like to teach anyone. Those are the words I taught my kids, for instance. I learned early on I thought, what if I could teach my own kids the secret words of success? So they're just a natural part of their vocabulary. And so I created this character, this imaginary character. This is when my sons were very little.
Right.
I created a character called Eloquent the Elephant. She had a trunk full of words. And every day the two little boys would run in and say, Daddy, what's the word for today? And so it was a game. They didn't even know they were learning this wonderful language of success. And so every day, Eloquent the Elephant would give them a new word. And then the next day, they would get a new word, but they'd also have to tell me what the previous day's word meant. So I wanted them to understand it so that they could apply it. And I was able to watch the lives of two young guys literally grow and change based on the new vocabulary they had gotten. And since that time, I always wished there was a way to have schools, to have education be aware of the fact that our brains get wired with the messages we hear most. It's all based on repetition because of the brain's neuroplasticity. That's how it rewires itself. And I've often thought there has to be a way, and eventually there will be, for where every school will be teaching positive self-talk as a basis, as a foundational area of learning, so that kids can think differently as they're learning.
This resonates really well with me, just exactly what I saw all those years ago when I was a teacher in the classroom and I had behavioral students. And I just thought, we weren't taught how to teach them how to behave. It was like overwhelming as a new teacher. Then I went to work in the speaking industry and saw a speaker working with adults, teaching them success. But then he was challenged to work with 12 kids. And I thought, oh, good luck. He's not going to be able to do this. Like I could, because I was thinking, of my experience in the classroom. But he transformed these 12 kids with these type of ways of thinking, and it changed my whole world. It was like, this is where I want to put my hat down, and this is the work that I want to do. But it's a big task. Like you said, how are we going to, social and emotional learning is getting into the schools. They're finally starting to see neuroplasticity into the classroom and see how, the science of reading works now. So it's a process, but, once you see it, it's really hard to see um, without it, right? It's like this is like I can see the future, but how do you see it? How would you see it going into classrooms?
I think I think the turning point has been the general acceptance of neuroscience as something that is interesting to the general public. So it moved just out of academia completely, and or it didn't just neuroscience didn't just live in academia. It moved into the general population. People got interested. We started to think more about, wow, that's interesting. You mean the brain gets programmed like a computer? And in fact, it was the computer age that actually introduced neuroscience into the average home because of the correlation or the comparison of the brain to a computer.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are generally aware of that now. So it used to be years ago when I first would do seminars and I was teaching these concepts, people, if I would talk about the brain too much, I could watch their eyes were kind of glazing over.
Yeah.
Like, don't talk about the brain. I just want to know how to get better now.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but that's changed. Now if I'm talking to an audience and I ask for a show of hands, like, would anyone here like to hear how the brain gets wired? All of their hands go up. Now they're interested. So I think it's that acceptance of the work in the field of neuroscience that's going into classrooms, going into the home, and into social media and so on. So I think just our change in the change in our acceptance of science itself is going to help that a lot.
For sure.
We used to look at self-help from the standpoint of a person's personal ability to get better. It was almost a spiritual thing where you had to have it within you to want to get better. And that's why you'd read those books, like the positive thinking books and so on. And we left everything up to really good authors who were telling people they could get better, and they were showing them that they were giving them tools and steps. But that was good. I really like the many authors who have helped so many millions of people do better. But all of that was done without ever saying, here's how the brain works, or without going into depth. And here's how it really works in the brain. And if you understand this, then you'll know it's not just a feel-good book or a feel-good concept. This is how it really works. And the brain has rules. as we know from the field of neuroscience, the brain has rules. And if you follow those rules and your goal is to get better, to think better, to have a better attitude, a different mindset, we know that the brain will do that for you because that's the way the brain is designed to work.
So let's take this back. So beyond our life experiences, like, our school and our friends, where would you say our programming comes from? Like, we could go really deep. Does it go back generations before, like how our grandparents were with our parents? Where did it start?
Well, for the individual, it starts at birth, maybe before, but we're certain that it starts at birth. From the moment you were born, every message you received, everything you heard, everything you saw, everything you experienced, those messages were wired into your brain, at least temporarily. And then those messages that were repeated most frequently, those messages, the brain thought, oh, this must be important because I'm hearing it again and again. It's being reported. I better record this one permanently. So it wires that message in stronger. So those messages started first from our parents. And the first message we get actually is usually the infant tries to focus on their mother's eyes. That's their first connection. They can't see well yet. They're trying to focus on that. From that moment forward, every message they get, every time a parent says, you can do this, or I believe in you, or you're such a dunce, what an idiot. I can't believe you never listen to anything I say. You don't know what the truth is. Those kinds of messages are repeated and repeated again and again and again. And the brain doesn't, the part of the brain that stores all of the messages we get, that part of the brain doesn't know the difference between something that's true and something that's false, or right or wrong, or bad or good, or positive or negative. Its job is just to wire it in, and then it acts on the programs we get that are the strongest. So our parents got programmed by their parents and their life experiences and so on, all the way back. So our parents are simply delivering to us without even thinking about it often. It can be very unconscious. Our parents are just delivering to us the programs that they got that are the strongest. Once a parent realizes, oh, wait a minute, I need to be careful about what I'm saying to my kids because I think I'm programming them for the rest of their lives. Once a parent realizes that, they often make some quick changes and they stop saying some things and they begin saying more positive things. When my two sons that I mentioned earlier, when they were young, I had this idea. And I thought, what if I couldn't talk to either of my two sons for a month? And instead of talking to them, what if each of them had a little bitty computer keyboard strapped to their little infant or their little kid self? And on top of the keyboard, there was a sign that said, Dad, Mom, everything you type into my keyboard will be stored for life and acted on as though it's true. Please be careful. So I thought, what if I couldn't talk to them for a month, but I could only, if I wanted to say anything to them, I'd have to type it into their little keyboard. And I realized, although I didn't speak badly to my kids, but I realized I would never, ever say something like, type in something like, you're so stupid, enter. Or you're not good enough, enter. Or you're not smart enough to be president, enter. And things that parents were typing in to their kids' keyboards all the time. And I realized that if parents had to actually type their messages into keyboards that were plugged right into their kids' brain, that they would change the messages they gave to their kids. So based on that, recognizing that when my kids were young, I decided, what if we could let parents know that they've got an incredible opportunity to, and not only parents, but teachers also, and adults. What if they saw talking to kids as an opportunity, that they're literally guiding that child's future by the messages they give that boy or girl that's being wired into their brain over through repetition, and that those become that child's truth. And if you think about that, it's really foundational. That is clearly where it all starts. And then our friends chime in, and our friends, or not quite friends, at school, and then social media steps in, and the internet, and just look at the kinds of messages kids are getting hour after hour, day after day. And it's not difficult to see why some kids are struggling and some kids are doing better than others.
It sure is. I really wish we could eliminate social media for kids. Like, didn't Australia do something with social media? They put a cap on it or something. You know, my kids are always telling me what's new in different countries, but I really that's the number one thing. But the whole country has to get on board because we can't just say, you know, limit it in your household and then they go out of the house and they'll find a way around it. The kids are smart. So I just wish there was a way around that. I see so much damage from it.
Yeah.
So what about, so we know where it starts. We know the damage that it does if it's negative. You've found ways that you know that it can be positive and put you on a trajectory for success. But what would you say would be ways to change if we notice that we're saying something, you know, we might just catch ourselves saying something that could be limiting? Would it be that typing into the keyboard idea, or how would you stop doing something that you might even not be even aware of that you're doing?
We've discovered through many years of working with self-talk and tens of thousands of people through the work of the Self-Talk Institute, we've arrived at four really simple, really doable steps that people say, yeah, that makes sense. I'd like to change some of my programs. What should I do? There are four steps. Step number one is monitor. Monitor, and that means to listen to yourself. We're actually not trained to listen to ourselves. We can go through an entire day without really thinking about thinking. We just go through the day. We just we react to the day. When you start practicing monitoring, you listen to every single thing you say. That becomes obvious, and you listen to everything you think, and then you kind of follow the rule. If you're saying something that's harmful or could work against you, then that's probably negative self-talk. And if you're saying something that works for you in the positive, then that's positive self-talk. It's very within the first day, people begin to recognize the pattern of their thinking, and they tend to have either negative pattern, a neutral pattern, or a positive pattern, and you can identify that very quickly. It's easy for us to do. The only problem with that very simple step is that it's a habit, and we're not used to doing it. So unless you have a goal to spend 30 days listening to yourself, which you can do, it actually gets fun after a while. And unless you set a goal to do that, your old programs may just step back in and say, "Come on, who needs this? I'm busy. I've got other things to think about. I've got social media to attend to." And but step one is monitor. Step two is edit, and editing is really fun. That is, the moment you catch yourself saying something that could hurt you, put you down, work against you, you turn it around and say the opposite instead of saying, "I'm so stupid." I mean, people just do instantly. I'm so stupid. Stop, turn it around and say, "Wait a minute, that's not like me at all. I'm really smart. I can do this. I got this."
Right.
And I should add there that when people first hear about positive self-talk, they tend to think, Yeah, but that's unrealistic. That's Pollyanna positive thinking. But that's not good self-talk if it's unrealistic. Good self-talk is very realistic. It's very practical. A line of self-talk that's positive is I do everything I need to do when I need to do it. There's nothing Pollyanna about that. That's very practical. So so if anyone watching or listening right now think, yeah, I've heard of positive thinking, but that's just unrealistic. No, that's just the wrong kind of positive thinking. The right kind, practical positive thinking works, and that's what you want to wire your brain with. So step number two is to edit, change, begin to rewire your brain with the right kinds of messages that you're giving yourself. Step three is listen. The best way we've ever found to change your self talk, to change your internal language, is to treat it exactly like learning a new language. And you can do that best by listening to it. And there's an app for doing that. Today, there's an app for anything. This is a good app because it really helps people learn a new language just by playing it in the background. And then step four is practice. And that means you get to practice positive self-talk throughout your entire day, every day. And if you set a goal to just do that, listen to self-talk, practice it for 30 days, that's long enough for the habit to begin to wire itself in. And then you start to do that naturally and automatically.
Oh, this is good. And you talked about an app. Is that your Self-Talk Plus app? Is that the
Yeah,
app? Yes.
the name of the app is Self-Talk Plus. And of course, the plus is the fact that you can just listen to the right self-talk. It has over 125 self-talk programs that I've written over a long period of time, and you can actually create a playlist and so on. And you should plan if you listen to the app, and I encourage people to do that. It's free for 30 days. And then after that, you probably will want to continue listening. And if you'd like to listen but feel you can't afford the subscription, you can just request a scholarship and you can listen forever for free. So there's no reason not to do it. It's easy to do. And I think what makes the app so successful, and there are thousands of people, of course, all over the world listening to positive self talk on the app. The reason it's so successful is it works best if you don't focus on it. It works best if you just let it play in the background while you're doing something else, while you're getting ready in the morning or driving in the car or just being around the house at any time. Your brain actually accepts the new words, the new programs, and wires them in better when you're not trying to focus on them. And the reason for that is it would seem like, yeah, but if you're wanting to learn something, you should study it and really focus. But the reason it works best not to focus on listening to self talk is that if you try to focus on it, your old programs will argue with you and say, no, that's not true. No, you're not that smart. You're not that good. You're not qualified or capable. And so it just tries to work against you. And so those old programs come back in and they own your wiring mechanism at the moment. So yeah, just play it in the background for about 15 minutes a day. And then the next day, listen again while you're driving in the car or just getting ready each day. I like to listen in the morning because it sets your day up. It really says, "I've got this. I'm going for it today. Today counts. Like today's important, so I'm going to make today work." And you develop that kind of attitude, that mindset. That think about how many decisions you might make during that day that are going to be affected by the mindset you just created the first thing each morning.
So true. So true. This is cool that you've created this. And I'm just thinking, outside of the app, it's so important who we surround ourselves with, right? Like same idea, because the talk that's going on in the background, even if we're not paying attention to it, is going right into our brain and impacting us, whether we are intending it to or not, right? Like, I used to think about that when I started to learn the whole idea of thinking positively in the classrooms, but thinking of the students in the classrooms and making sure that they were kind to each other, that type of thing. I'm just thinking, how would you have this impact a classroom of students or a group of people? It, is it one-on-one, or how could we impact more than just one at once?
There are teachers who actually play self-talk in the classroom, and they'll do it during, let's say, a study period, for instance. Um, Many years ago, when we first began experimenting with this, there was a class where the teacher, in those days, they didn't have smartphones and they didn't have apps. They had something called cassettes, the little black plastic things
Okay.
that we listen to music on. The teacher, and self-talk in those days was on cassettes. And so the teacher took a small cassette player and put it on the um, front corner desk that no one was sitting in, and then just pushed play and would play that session of self-talk every day. And the kids, because it was a study class, the kids could sit wherever they wanted to sit. And there was this one boy who had, he had, he was struggling. He had problems. Um, and he did not want to listen to this stuff, these positive things, because they were exactly the opposite of what he was being told at home, what he thought about himself, and so on. And the teacher observed him. He moved to the farthest opposite corner desk, so he got as far away from that cassette player playing positive self-talk as he could. And while the self-talk was playing during the first days, he was carving his initials in his notebook, and it was just it was very negative. But the teacher didn't say anything about it. She just watched the class, and over the next days, she watched as finally he began to move closer and closer to that corner desk where the self-talk was playing. And on the last day, he was sitting in the desk with the cassette player. And the reason I found out about that was that the teacher sent me a letter.
Oh, cool.
And wrote to me and told me about it. And the boy also sent me a letter. And it was one of the most heartwarming letters I've ever read. It said, "Thank you, Dr. Helmstetter, for self-talk and letting me know that I was, forgetting the exact word, that I was okay, or that I could make it." He said, "I want you to know that I dropped out of the gang." So he'd apparently been with the gang. I'm getting my homework done in time, and I'm no longer afraid of the dark at night. And I
Wow.
thought, oh my gosh. But you can see what happened. He got a picture of himself that he had just never had before. And he got that because the teacher was cool enough to say, "We're just going to play this and go ahead about your studies, and I'll just play it in the background." Yeah. So schools have been doing that. And I think in the future we'll see more and more schools, especially because of the app now.
Right.
More and more schools will be at least making the kids aware of their self-talk, and hopefully applying some of that in their classrooms.
This is so needed today, and 20 years ago when I was working in the classroom with students that really needed it. This is incredible to hear about. What is your vision for the work that you're doing? Where do you see this? Like, obviously, in schools more, but where's your vision going for this?
Well, I'm fortunate in that because my books are in so many countries. They're in something over 74 countries. I one of my favorite. Every so often I get a box of books in the mail from a publisher in some country, and one of my favorite ones was getting a box of books of um, the book "What to Say When You Talk to Yourself," published in Russian in Russia. And to me, that was especially poignant because it's all about free thinking. It's about expressing yourself and living up to your highest potential and getting past limitations in a country that not too long ago in the past was very limited in what a person was supposed to think and how they were supposed to think and what they were supposed to believe and so on. I got another box of those books from China. It was being published in Chinese and so on. At any rate, because of the history of What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, of that book going into so many different countries, I began to realize and recognize that the use of the learning of the right kind of self-talk is absolutely universal. It's not just international, it's universal. That the letters that I get from people are the same, regardless what background or country they're from. It's the same thing. They're learning to change how they think. And as a result of that, they're learning to change their picture of the future, which is where everything starts. So I think, to answer your question, I think what will happen is that the message of self-talk will continue to grow. And in not too many years, it will be taught in schools generally. People will understand it. This will be old news instead of new news. By the way, 40 years ago, I thought people would get this in about 3 or 4 years. I thought, oh, everybody's going to get this. My first book was all of the talk shows, like I was on Oprah Winfrey and CNN and so on, and I just thought, and then I started speaking all over the world, and I thought they're going to get this really fast, and then I don't know what I'll do next, but I'll go beyond this.
Right.
And now there are still people just finding out about positive self-talk for the first time, and so I realized the job isn't done yet, but it will be, and eventually, just like, at one time, it was said that we'll never be able to teach everyone in the world how to read. It was an impossible task. And that wasn't too many years ago, at a time when much of the world could not read. Only certain groups of people were reading, but people had a goal to help everyone in the world read. And today, it's not 100%, but it's getting close. It was an impossible challenge to help everyone read, to teach everyone how to read. And now almost everyone can read. And in the future, everyone will be able to read. I think the same thing is true about our programming and our self-talk. At some time, maybe not too far distant future, especially because we're connected now, because everybody has an iPhone, we're connected, and I think social media will actually do some good, and it'll help us do that, to let people know that they can change their self-talk and they can change their programming. So my vision is that we will have somewhat of a different world when people see the best of themselves rather than see life as a struggle.
That's incredible. Incredible. And what you said there, bringing back the whole quest for getting everyone to learn to read, that's where I put my hat right now for my corporate work. So that's what I do day to day. It's all based on that premise, and it's all about the brain and how we have to be taught explicitly how to read. And so I'm making the connection now that self-talk, we have to be taught how to think in a certain way, right? Is that Would you say we have to be taught this, although it can come in through our subconscious mind, but we have to do it explicitly. It has to be done on purpose,
If,
right?
yeah,
Not by
if
accident.
if we want to get it right, we have to learn it.
Right.
That doesn't happen by accident. And there's one thing that this is an odd thing. People think they've got it when they say, well, I use affirmations. Self-talk that we're talking about is not the same as affirmation. I happen to like affirmations. There's nothing wrong with them. They can be very helpful. But self-talk is learning a new language.
Mm-hmm.
Self-talk requires repetition to actually rewire the brain. Affirmations don't do that. And what happens is people say, well, I don't need to do anything about this because I use some affirmations. I have some on my refrigerator or something like that. But that doesn't rewire the brain. So I encourage people to go keep using affirmations, but go one step beyond affirmations and learn the right self-talk. Again, where I started was learning foreign languages. If you look at self-talk, like learning a foreign language, only this would be let's just call it the language of well-being instead of the language of failure. Just learn that language. And we know it can be taught. We know it can, the brain will pick it up. We've got a lot of experience. Hundreds of thousands of people have done this and are living with the right self-talk today. So we know it works. And we know anyone can do it. We know that it works at almost any age, from very, very young to elderly people. Your brain is waiting for you to tell it what to do, to give it the right instructions, to wire in the right messages. It's just been waiting for that. But if you make the, and I think this is a good place to start. Make the choice to learn about positive self-talk. Make the choice to get the right self-talk, and then begin practicing it for 30 days. And that's enough time for you to make up your mind about continuing to do that. That's enough time for you to start seeing some results. By the way, your friends will ask you what's changed. When you change your self-talk, you change your attitude. When you change your attitude, you change your mindset, and people sense that. It's an exciting thing. And I should mention this also. You may find when you start practicing positive self-talk, you may find that some of your friends change. You may not spend as much time with the same people because you become aware of everyone is programming me. I think I'm going to surround myself with people who are giving me the right programs instead of the wrong programs.
Right.
And then there will be some people that you have to associate with or be around because maybe you work with them. You could be married to that person or so on. In that case, just remember this. This will help. The strongest programs always win. So if your programs, your self-talk gets right, and your self-talk is you're getting the right strong programs, those programs get stronger and stronger with practice, then your own internal mental programming will be stronger than the negative programs of the people around you. And those people will have less and less effect on you. So if you have to be around people who are negative, make sure your programs are strong because the strongest programs always win.
That's a really good point. Wow, this has been really cool to hear from your point of view about all of this, Dr. Helmstetter. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today and share your fascinating work that's been helping people globally for decades. This is just the beginning, like you say. I'd love to see more and more people understand how to change and recognize if they're going off track with their self-talk. So for people to get started with your work, is the best place through your app, would you say?
Yes, because it's the easiest. I mean, I love it when people read my books, but it takes time for people to read books.
For sure.
The app is the easiest. So yeah, go to Self Talk Plus, download the app, start listening, and you'll know within a few days whether this is something you'd like to do. I think you're going to love it.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. And for people who want to connect with you, I've put your Facebook, your Instagram, your website. Is there any other places that I should have to connect people to you?
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been an absolute joy to have met you.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.